What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Dunk on AP podcast. Today, we're going to be dunking on AP World, getting started with Unit 2, talking about the Mongol Empire. So, without further ado, let's go dunk on AP. All right, so we're going to be starting off actually with topic 2.1, talking about the Silk Road. So, the big things that lead to increased trade on the Silk Road and other networks of exchange are increased political stability in the years 1200 to 1450 in what we call the post-classical era. You have more centralized governments and people who are moving past just worrying about what they eat all the time. Also, you have improved infrastructure. You have better roads and canals. You also have specialization of labor, which was a direct result of more population and urbanization, more people moving to the cities. You also have better technology and innovations leading to the increased trade on the Silk Roads and other network of exchange. Some examples of better technology and innovation: you've got the caravanserai, you've got credit, you've got paper money, you've got the compass, you've got the astrolabe, you've got rudders, you've got the Chinese junk, which is the sea trade. It's the ship that the Chinese are using to trade. You've also got better understanding of nature, which is not always necessarily relevant for overland route, but if you understand this for the ocean, that's going to help you with seasonal winds, prevailing winds, and ocean currents. So that's what led to increased trade on the Silk Road. So what's the effect of that? Some effects of increased trade on the Silk Road and other networks of exchange are trade cities. These are cities that only really exist to facilitate trade. The increased volume in trade results in further urbanization. Also, cities develop along the Silk Roads, like Kashgar, which was on the western edge of China, and Samarkand, which was between China and Europe in modern day Uzbekistan. So with the increased travel here, you do get something that I mentioned earlier, and I'll explain now: the caravanserai, which were inns where travelers could rest. They're about 100 miles apart or so, which is about the length that a camel can go before it needs rest and water. And this allowed travelers to rest themselves and their animals. Also, you get money economies. Using money rather than bartering over commodities. That may sound commonplace to us now, but it wasn't at this time. China did this and invents paper money called flying cash. This is actually one of the inspirations for European banking houses. And then you've got the Hanseatic League, which is an alliance formed with European cities to protect trade after the Crusades. And after the Crusades bring European interest in luxury goods from Asia. So the thing about all of this innovation, the thing about all of this change, for each of these societies, they're going to, in some capacity, run into or be conquered by the Mongols. So the Mongols, just to give you a little bit of background here, they were a nomadic people from Mongolia. So rainfall in Central Asia was too little to support, and still in a lot of ways is too little to support large-scale agriculture. The Asian steppe is good for herding, though, herding animals, herding livestock. This lifestyle means that they seek to trade with settled people. This also makes them good middlemen culturally, connecting cultures. When trading wasn't good, so often these steppe people will resort to raids. So this leads to the rising and the taking over of Chinggis or Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan lived from 1167 to 1227. His original name is Temujin. Genghis or Chinggis Khan means universal ruler. So he, in a lot of ways, is sort of the consolidator of these tribes, and he is going to be the person that brings the Mongols to prominence. So he promotes officers based on merit and loyalty to him. If that sounds a lot like Song China in some of those Chinese dynasties, it's because it is. Now, the reasons why the Mongols were so unbelievably successful and will end up conquering more land than the Romans ever did through conquest: they have a very small population, about 1 million people, and then the army is about 100,000 to 125,000. That is not the biggest army in Eurasia at this time, and it's not particularly close. But they have a great cavalry. They are unbelievable at shooting arrows while on horses. They have a great short bow that they use. They use siege weapons like ladders, storm walls, and catapults to get over walled cities. And in a lot of ways, the Mongols will make walled cities irrelevant. They have amazing military organization. Whenever they attacked on the battlefield, they seemed like so much more than they were because they moved so quickly. Also, Psychologically, they could defeat enemies often before they even faced them. News of Mongol brutality and treachery spread all over Eurasia, and oftentimes people would surrender before, like when the Mongols got there, just to avoid the fate that they would get otherwise. Within Genghis Khan's life, the Mongols conquered northern China, Central Asia, and Persia. Genghis heads east in 1210 and begins conquering the Jin Empire in northern China. He has a brutal military reputation. By 1227, the Khanate, or the Kingdom of Genghis Khan, went from the North China Sea all the way to Persia. So the effects of Mongol conquering. The Mongols are indeed brutal, and someone living at this time might not exactly love for us to talk about the positive effects of Mongol conquering, but a few of their positive effects is that they are somewhat religiously tolerant. As long as you do the things that you're supposed to do under their rule, they will mostly allow you to remain your religion as long as you are willing to pray for them. And they also bring law and order to the Silk Roads. They really fortify and unite the Silk Roads in a lot of ways. All this stuff is called the Pax Mongolica. This is the Mongolian peace in Eurasia in the 13th and the 14th century. So another thing that Mongols do is they build a system of roads and revitalize trade between Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. So their empire actually expands. Three of Genghis Khan's grandsons set up their own khanates, bringing in new people to the Mongolian economy and networks of exchange. So first you've got Batu and the Golden Horde. Batu leads 100,000 soldiers into disconnected Russia. And in case it wasn't quite clear, Batu is Genghis Khan's grandson. Batu, or he's one of the three that we're going to be talking about here. Batu leads 100,000 soldiers into disconnected Russia, taking over parts of Western Russia and making them pay tribute. Turns Europe against the Mongols. That Europe had been fine with it while the Mongols were attacking maybe Middle Eastern Islamic powers, but whenever it comes to European powers, that's going to be an issue. Russia spends several hundred years doing it, but eventually they fight off all Khan descendants. It results in a distinct Russian culture because they develop differently than the rest of Europe, because they spend hundreds of years not necessarily connected to Europe. They spend hundreds of years fighting off Khans. And then you've got Hulagu and the Islamic heartlands, another grandson of Genghis Khan. In 1258, the Mongols destroy and just absolutely demolish the Islamic city of Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, and they killed 200,000 residents in the city. So the Khanate was mostly Islamic land around modern day Iran, and that was land that was ruled by the Khans. This allowed Persian officials, they actually allowed Persian officials to run local areas and collect taxes for them. So the Khans didn't necessarily have to have their hands in everything. They allowed local officials, even of different religions, to have say in what went on, as long as they ran it in the Mongols' best interest. So eventually, Hulagu and the Islamics in the Islamic heartlands, they're going to be defeated in 1260 by an alliance of Muslim Mamluks and Christian Crusaders. Unlikely alliance, to be sure. This led to Mongol persecution, actually, of Islam and Christianity, something that they were not always known to do, but after that they did. So this leads to probably the most important grandson of Genghis Khan, and that is Kublai Khan, who lived from 1264 to 1294. He took over the rest of China, and that is what he is most well known for. He establishes the Yuan dynasty in China, which will end in 1368. Now, he does fail to take Cambodia, Vietnam, Burma, and Japan despite repeated attempts, and that's going to be an issue in a minute. But in a lot of ways, Kublai Khan is going to blend into Chinese culture. So, how is it that the Mongols, this unbelievable empire that has taken over so much of Eurasia, how do they lose power? Well, first of all, they adopt and blend into many of the cultures they took over. So in a lot of ways, they don't maybe have that warrior edge that they had a few generations ago whenever they were really doing the conquering. Being the one who has conquered everything tends to make you a little bit soft after a few generations. Kublai Khan actually alienates the Chinese by hiring foreigners for the government rather than native Chinese. They also lose those invasions, and that leads to them losing some of that idea of, man, these people can beat anybody. Well, they keep struggling. They lost to the Cambodians, they lost in Cambodia, they lost in Vietnam, they lost in Burma, they lost in Japan. Maybe they aren't this like all powerful thing that we thought they were. So that certainly doesn't help. But then in 1368, you have Zhu Yuanzhang, who was a Buddhist monk who leads a revolt to overthrow the Yuan dynasty and establish the Ming dynasty, which will go from 1368 to 1644. The Golden Horde loses all of its territory by 1369. In the end, Mongols are going to capture and hold more territory than the Romans ever did. They're also going to revitalize interregional trade and stabilize the Silk Road, really through what we call the Pax Mongolica, the peace of the Mongols. It's kind of a strange thing to call killing millions and millions of people peace, but in a lot of ways, it does bring some order to these places that in a lot of cases had been a little bit lawless on these Silk Roads in particular. They're also going to facilitate cultural exchange. Islamic science goes to China. Paper from China facilitates communication through Eurasia with the help of Gutenberg's printing press, too. Mongol conquest helped transmit, on top of everything else, the bubonic plague or the Black Death from southern China to Central Asia, then Southeast Asia to Europe. They're also going to revolutionize the use of centralized power, which is going to be something that all of these kingdoms are going to start doing here pretty soon after the decline of the Mongols. A controversial empire, to be sure, but no doubt a powerful one.